Well, welcome to episode 2 on our first day. I have a cup of tea here, and I hope that you manage also to go and get a glass of water or whatever. Actually, I asked some previous students about how they experienced doing these episodes. And they said, actually, quite a number said that they preferred it to actually doing live class. And I said, why? And they said, because, they could just pause and come and go. And, they had a lot more flexibility. If we were doing live class Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, not everybody could come and go, and do as they please, as it were. So I'm just trying to be positive here. But as I mentioned in our first episode, my book, Wild Ones, is based on the book of Judges, which is in the First Testament, or what some people call the Old Testament. And I don't know if you've read the book of Judges. Hopefully you are getting through it. But it is a book full of wild ones. That's my title. By the way, it was historically speaking, it was about 1300 BC or thereabouts. That's the setting, the historical setting of the characters in the book of Judges. And at that time, the world was going through massive climatic change, advances in weaponry. There were pandemics, and there was people groups, population shifts, peoples moving from one place to another. Doesn't sound too dissimilar from our own 21st century. And there's another note of similarity in the book of Judges. The book of Judges, one commentator, Timothy Keller, he said of the people in the book of Judges, they're disasters. He said it's a series of disasters. People of unfaithfulness, everyone doing as they please. People engrossed in the deepest sin. He says they're despicable people doing deplorable things. Doesn't sound too good. It's a book of trashy tales. Trashy tales about dysfunctional people, dysfunctional characters, flawed failures. It's a dismal depiction of humanity. The reason why I like the Bible, to be honest, it's not just a book of religious sayings. It's not just a book of virtues. It's not just a book full of inspirational stories. The Bible, in one sense, depicts reality. There are people in the book of Judges who make horrendous mistakes. Me too. There are people in the book of Judges who act foolishly. Me too. There are people in the book of Judges who just so mistreat others. I've done that. There are flawed characters, dysfunctional characters. Me too. So that's a point of similarity, and you too. And that's why I warmed to the book of Judges. And it's full of wild people. Me too. Thus wild ones. And so in this episode, I'm just setting the scene. And I'd like us to read some scripture at this point. So I'm going to diminish me, go to there. Hopefully you can still see me. Here's a passage out of scripture, and it's from Luke 23. And you'll be familiar with this. So let me read it. 2 other men, both criminals, were also led out with Jesus to be executed. And when they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there, along with the criminals, one on the right, the other on his left. And Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing." And they divided up Jesus' clothes by casting lots. And the people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. And they said, he saved others, let him save himself if he is God's Messiah, the chosen one. And the soldiers also came up and mocked him. And they offered him vinegar, wine vinegar, and said, if you are the king of the Jews, save yourself. Now there was a written notice above him which read, this is the king of the Jews. And one of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at Jesus. Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us. But the other criminal rebuked him. Don't you fear God, he said, since you are under the same sentence. We are punished justly, for we're getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong. Then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus answered him, truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. So I'm going to bring myself back into the screen like this. You know, I don't know what you heard in that particular reading. By the way, our particular course is soaked in scripture. We do a lot of scripture reading. That's one of the aims for this particular course. When I read that passage, and I've read it a number of times, the thing that always strikes me is that, the three people on the three crosses are having a conversation. And there is a sense in which you think, it can't be that bad. I mean, they're having a conversation. And you see, so what I did then was I did some homework, some research around the crucifixion. And you're probably wondering where I'm going with this. I join all the dots up, in these particular episodes. So just stick with me and enjoy the ride. But when I did some research on the crucifixion, a lot of people were crucified. The whole idea was to keep them alive for as long as you could. And some people were kept alive for days. So what you get on the cross is someone who's sort of half dead, half alive. And they're just covered in blood and dirt. And they're sort of being nibbled at by rats. And they're being pecked at by crows. And all the while, just below them are family members and friends weeping as they watch their loved one suffer over a prolonged period of time. And by the way, when someone was crucified, they were crucified naked. Now, I know that some of the paintings and some of the pictures that we've seen depicting Jesus' crucifixion has Jesus, there's a loincloth, there's, he's covered up, as it were. But in reality, they were crucified naked. In other words, the crucifixion is not just about violence. It's about shame. And Jesus would have been shamed on the cross. What I mean by that is there would have been sexual insults about his private parts and so on. And thus the snaring. So the crucifixion was not, if it was just about killing of another, they could have just, hung people and got it over and done with as soon as possible. But the Romans wanted to shame people, not just inflict violence. And so our founder, the founder of the church, our founder, was shamed. And we are to be a church of the shamed. In other words, just happened. I came aware of something I think it was last week or the week before that, and a church were interested in calling a particular person to be their pastor or a pastor on their team. So I'm disguising names and keeping this anonymous, and I know something about that person, and that person has acted foolishly. That person has acted deplorably. That person has evidenced dysfunction and failure, just like the people in the book of Judges. And I was approached, and by the people in this church. And I said that, you will discover things about this person, episodes, in earlier years about their life. And it's not easy to hear. And so the process went on, and this person was, interviewed. And I'm still wondering till this day how it went on. And I suspect it hasn't gone well for this person. But I don't think it's this person's fault. I actually recommended this person, even knowing what I know about what they have done in years gone by. Yes, still recommended this person. Because we are a church of the shamed. And we all carry dysfunction, and we all have mistakes. And if our founder was shamed, then he has created a group of people that no matter what they have done, no matter, where they have been, no matter, they are still welcomed. You see, I tend to think that when the last place that people out there, and don't ever forget that there are people out there in our neighbourhoods who carry shame. They carry a lot of shame. And they desperately want to be cured of their shame. They desperately want to meet people who can say, what you've been through, I've been through too. What you've done, I've done it too. Because, they desperately want to hear that. Me too, you too. And that's why our founder, who was shamed, created a community of the shamed. Because he created this church such that no matter the wild things that we've done, no matter the deplorable things we've done, no matter our dysfunction, we can find ourselves in a place amongst a group of people, no matter our history. But the last place that people want to go to these days when they carry shame is the church. Now, why is that? Why is church the last place? You hear that phrase, I couldn't darken the church doors. Now, it's a terrible phrase. And it's got nothing to do with race. It's got everything to do with, they wouldn't want me. If they knew what I have done, the despicable, deplorable thing that I've done, if they knew the dysfunction that I carry, if they knew about my failures, they wouldn't want me. So the last place people would want to come to is a church. And I've reflected on this, and I kind of can't help but think that, some people, they think that the church, the church is, it's a posh place, full of posh people. A church is a posh church for posh people, a church for the polished and the pretty, a church, it's for the put together people, the kind of, the people who've got it together. Now, I know that's not so. The church is actually for the shamed. But people out there, they think that, when they watch people file up to churches on Sundays, often the people that are filing up are polished and pretty and all put together and posh. I wish we had a few more wild ones. That people would notice the wild ones also turning up to our churches, and people would go, whoa, you mean they belong there? Absolutely. And you see, sometimes some people, they have a distorted view of God. They somehow think that, that's my computer fading out. Somehow they think that, God is Mr. Clean. They create this image of God who's kind of bald, who's white, who's big, and a God who has gloves on and, is forever scrubbing, the walls of heaven with disinfectant. And, if we were to look at the wardrobe of this God, everything is in its proper place. And if we opened the fridge in heaven, there would be Tupperware galore and everything would be spick and span, it would be shiny. In other words, our God is into neat and tidy. That's the image that, some people have of our God. That our God can't do wild. That our God can't do dirt. Our God can't do mess. Our God can't do dysfunction. Our God can't do despicable. Our God can't do deplorable. But what we see in the book of Judges is that, yes, there is a series of disasters in that book, but who keeps turning up? God. See, the real hero in the book of Judges is God. And God keeps turning up to his people no matter what they have just been through and done. And that's so good for you to know and for me to also know. Look, I've got to finish this episode. I just want you to imagine that, like some of the people in the book of Judges, you've made a terrible mistake. It's like, you've fallen into a big black hole. You've just stumbled over, you've acted foolishly, you've sinned terribly, and it's like you've fallen into this big black hole, into this pit. Now the question is, what does Jesus do? Does Jesus, that person has fallen into the pit. They've gone and acted, terribly. Does he keep himself distant from the hole, the pit? Because he doesn't want to get dirty. So he sort of, is that what? No, we don't get that picture, do we, of Jesus? Or does Jesus walk up to the pit? And does he look down? And that's all he does. No, we don't get that picture of Jesus. Or does Jesus point the finger? And he starts to, you sinner. No, we don't get that picture of Jesus. Or maybe what Jesus does is he kind of opens the scripture and then, tells how you can get clean and how you can walk out of the pit that you've created for yourself. No, we don't just see Jesus doing that. What does Jesus do with people who act deplorably? What does this God do? What this God does is he climbs down the side of the pit. He climbs into the hole that we have dug. and he comes and sits next to us. And he says, are you ready? And we say, ready? And Jesus says, yes, are you ready? And we say, ready for what? And Jesus says, me. I mean, you've acted deplorably, despicably. You've done something wrong, you know, and you've got a flawed character. You've made a huge mistake. And what does Jesus do? He walks towards us and he reaches out. He doesn't just wait for us to reach out to him. He reaches out to us. He comes to us. And that is what we see in the book of Judges, where God's people behaved badly. And who keeps turning up? God. It's just wonderful. Yeah. So there you are, friends, just introducing the book of Judges. Okay, catch you in the next episode. Cheers.